Today, we witnessed a record in volleyball that I don't think will ever be broken, a record in volleyball that I hadn't even thought was possible, and honestly, a record in volleyball I don't even want to be talking about. Right? It just feels like, especially after researching it all and watching how it went down today, it just feels wrong. And I'm a little heartbroken because it goes without saying that now Fenerbahce's women's volleyball team is the biggest golden set chokers of all time. There's no way around it. There is no way around it. It is now 5 years in a row, 5 straight Champions League tournaments where Fenerbahce's women's team has been knocked out in a golden set. And not only have they been knocked out in the golden set, but they've been knocked out in the golden set at home. And you know what? I haven't actually checked to see if this was a record, but in my mind, there's no possible way that any other team before this has lost 5 straight Champions League tournaments to a golden set, especially a team like Fenerbahce. Now, for those who don't know what a golden set is, it's a single set played to 15 when a 2-game series ends tied. Right? If the first team wins either 3-1 or 3-0, or they could also win 3-2, and then the other team wins with the same score, you go to a 15-point one-set tiebreak to see who moves on. It's something that pretty much only happens in the Champions League because we don't really have many home-and-home series like this in volleyball. But you have to say that a golden set is one of the most electrifying things that happens in volleyball, right? 1 set to 15 to figure it all out for all of the marbles, I think is amazing, right? It's one of the reasons why I kind of wish we had the home and home for finals matches, but it would just get too complicated, especially in the Champions League. Now, for 5 straight seasons, Fenerbahce has brought their fans, who are some of the greatest in the world, by the way. Fenerbahce is one of the greatest sport organizations, if not maybe the greatest sport organization in the world, and have some of the most ardent volleyball fans. And if you can see what's going on Twitter right now against their team, you would fully agree with that, right? And for 5 years in a row, they have brought their fans to the edge of elation, only to let them down in the worst possible way, like losing 5 straight matches or 5 straight years in a penalty shootout. And not to mention having these losses happen at home, 5 straight home golden set losses must be excruciating for the club and this fan. Now, I will break it down as Fenerbahce did lose today in the quarterfinals of the 2026 CEV Champions League, and they lost in the quarterfinals to Scandici. But when we go back a little bit, 2022, they lost to Vakif Bank in the semifinals. 2023, they lost to Vakif Bank again in the semifinals. 2024, they lost to Milano in the semifinals. In 2025, last year, they lost to Vakif Bank once again, this time in the quarterfinals. And now, 5 in a row, they lose number 5 in the quarterfinals, another golden set to Scandici. And now, it's not like this team is a bad team either, right? It's not like this team is a team that is overextending themselves to get to this position. This is a team, Fenerbahce is a team that year in, year out, at the beginning of the season, we're looking at them being like, can they do it all? Can they win the league? Can they win the Champions League? Can they go to the Club World Championships, right? When you look at some of the players they've had since the first golden set loss in 2022, it is absolutely crazy. It's some of the best players in the world. Melissa Vargas, Arina Fedoretseva, right there. That's 2 of the best offensive players in women's volleyball. Anna Cristina de Souza. You get Gizem Orge, the Turkish national team women's libero. How many awards has she won as the best libero in the world? And to top it all off, you have that leadership from Mrs. Turkey herself, Eda Erdem, right? That core of players has lost 5 straight golden sets in the Champions League. It's something that, even saying it now, I can't even believe it's true. I think that honestly, watching it today, it almost seemed like the volleyball gods were setting it up to make it the most excruciatingly painful experience for Fenerbahce fans. Because let me set the stage a little bit, okay? Game 1 in Scandici, right? In Italy, goes 3-0 to Scandici. Now, it was a good game for about 2 sets. Fenerbahce led for most of the first set before Scandici came back and they ended up taking it 3-0 at 25-23, 31-29, and then 25-19 in the third. It was on the back of 25 points by Katerina Andropova and her 6 aces. But, when you have a roster like Fenerbahce does, and you get to go back to one of the best home environments, bar none, in volleyball at home in Istanbul, you have to have some confidence, right? And once again, they do have experience forcing that golden set because they've done it 4 times in a row. And honestly, when you look at game number 2 that happened today, March 19th, 2026, this has to be one of the best matches I've seen all year. hands down, no doubt about it. When we do our year of ender poll here for Volleyball Source, I think it definitely has to be one of my favorite matches that we've seen throughout this season. As a neutral volleyball fan, it was one of the best. Set 1 started off absolutely insane. It was an absolutely back-to-back barn burner. And, once again, coming into this match, Scandici just needs to win 2 sets. 2 sets to guarantee themselves a spot in the Final Four, right? So Scandici, really, I thought they were looking good early on. The first set is back and forth, and it looked like they're going to take it all with an Antropova block to get them up 20-19. But then, of course, Melissa Vargas answers right back with the kill. Ace, overpass, ace to let them go up 23-22. But then, of course, Antropova goes back and serves an ace to put them up 24-23. So already, right, it's at 24-23. You already have 3 big lead changes, and it really set the tone for what the rest of this match was going to be like as well, too. Right? It really set the tone for just the back and forth drama, the flipping and flopping of both teams. Not so much flopping, most just, battling for advantage from both teams all match long. Fenerbahce managed to take back the advantage at 27-26 with a nice arena kill. And it really seemed like at this point, the volleyball gods were on Fenerbahce's side. And you're going to feel that consistent theme throughout most of this, because it just seemed like the volleyball gods were giving chance after chance after chance to Fenerbahce, right? They were really shutting down Scandici with some really good blocking and some good defense, and eventually ended up closing set number 1 32-30, which, is one more point than we saw from the last matchup between these teams from a Arena Fedoruseva block. Now, set 2 was much of the same. It was back and forth all the way through it, but just like in the last one, Antropova goes on a bit of run at the end of the game. And now it went from 18-18 all the way to 24-18 in favor of Scandici, and we're all tied up at 1 set apiece. And just as that serving run was going, you could just feel the momentum and the energy just get sapped out of the Fenerbahce gym. And it seemed at that point like Scandici had all of the momentum. And if you know anything about volleyball, momentum is everything. Momentum is absolutely everything, and they had all of it. Now, as I said, they're only 1 set away now. Scandici is only 1 set away from the Final Four, but Fenerbahce comes out absolutely flying. Arena Fedoruseva goes back to the baseline. It's all tied up at 3-3, and next thing you know, just like that, it's 9-3 in favor of Fenerbahce, and the home crowd is going wild. Right? They have the momentum back. They have some hope, and the fans are in it, right? The fans are in it, and when they're in it, they are loud, and they don't just stop there either. They just keep on going, keep on piling on. They're making Scandici look average. They're getting the entire starting lineup subbed off. Antropova's subbed off. Skinner is subbed off, and they end up taking the 3rd set 25-13, and now they're just 1 set away from clinching that golden set. But of course, it's basically do or die at this point, right? For pretty much both teams. Fenerbahce wins that next set. They go to a golden set. If Scandici wins the 4th set, it's all over. It is done. And now you'd think Fenerbahce would have all of that momentum, right? You'd think that they would be gearing up and getting ready for that gold set, but you would be wrong. You would be absolutely wrong, because Camilla Weitzel came out absolutely huge. 2 big blocks early on in the 4th. And then a couple of Antropova serves and aces made this thing blown wide open. 9-2 early on, right? 9-2 is absolutely wild, and it was dead in Istanbul. It was absolutely dead. And even Louis Lett, the commentator for this match, shout out Louis, great job, by the way. When Scandici goes up by Antropova's 3rd ace of the set, they go up 17-12 in the 4th. He even said to himself, that has to be it. That has to be the end of the game. I thought the same thing too, right? Varga goes back to miss her serve. It's 19-14 in favor of Scandici. Varga misses the serve, and I go, this has to be over. The game has to be done. But this is why I think must be so hard for this Fenerbahce team and their fans to experience this, because it just seemed like they did everything. Because at that point, they just start crawling back and getting block touches and making digs. And the game went from 19-14 to a massive challenge call happening when it looked like Vargas had missed the shot. It looked like Scandici was going to be able to go up 21-18, a similar score to that first set. But on the replay, on the challenge, by the sliverest of hairs, Vargas put that ball in, and all of a sudden, this game is 20-19. And they're right in there. But of course, it's not that easy, right? The drama had to continue. Vargas missed a shot late on to give Scandici the lead at 25-24, but right away, Ana Cristina Souza gets a big block, followed up by a Vargas ace, and just like that, we're going to a golden set. After all of that fighting in the first and coming back multiple times like they did, one of the, dominating the third set, and then one of the biggest comebacks I have ever seen, right? 9-2, 17-12, 19-14, they were down. And still they come back to be able to win that fourth set and win the match 27-25, right? And really, as this is all happening, right, because we are all aware of the curse, I'm thinking that Fenerbahce is about to break this curse in the most Disney-esque of ways, right? That if they can finish this off and get this golden set, there will be movies and documentaries made about this match here. But of course, as you already know, it wasn't to be. It was not going to happen for this team, because why would it? Well, why would it, right? Scandici comes out screaming, goes up 3-0. But then right away, Fenerbahce ties it back up at 3-3. And it just seemed like the balance of this match was going to flip and forth, back and forth, but it never happened. Scandici went up 6-3, and then Fedorovtseva, who only made 5 errors in the match, made 2 back-to-back errors, right? 40% of her errors at one of the most crucial times in the match. And this is not to put on blame at all. I think you can't blame someone who scored 36 points in this match, right? Who started so much of the comeback for this team throughout. But at the end of the day, she did make those 2 errors, got blocked, and then missed one to make this game a 8-3 split. Now, of course, it wasn't all done, but it looks like Fenerbahce just used a little too much of their magic fairy dust, because even though they fought back all the way to trail just, 11-12, fought back and fought back and fought back, it ended up being a win for Scandici. And it honestly, like, the curse continues, and it has to be one of the most devastating losses I've ever seen for a team. To lose your 5th straight golden set at home in a match where your 2 best players, Fedorovtseva scores 36 and Vargas scores 30, right? Where you made miraculous comeback after miraculous comeback, where you dominated at one point, when you have your home fans on your side. It just must be so devastating. It really feels like they did absolutely everything they could to get the win. On top of all that, it really does feel like this club as a whole did everything they could to go fix this and to change this curse and to go finally get that win, right? At the beginning of the year, when I was looking at this roster, it was honestly, like, I remember looking at it and being like, oh my goodness, this is a team that could win it all. They went out and changed the things that they needed to do, right? They went out and got one of the best setters in the world, Olympic gold medalist in Alessia Oro, because that was always one of the biggest hits on this Fenerbahce team, right? Macris was too old. Then they had players who just couldn't get it done, so they went out and got Alessia Oro, right? They couldn't pass the ball well enough with Ana Cristina and Fedorovtseva out there, so they brought in Hande Baladin, who isn't really known to score a lot of points, but she's one of the best receivers out there as well. How they even went out and got Agnieszka Korneluk, right? One of the best blockers in the world, to help, clog up the middle and take some minutes off Ada Erdem. And it was just like, what else can you do at that point, right? What else can you do? You're adding some big names to an already stacked roster, and it still doesn't work out. Now, I don't really want to get into the minutiae of the game. Like, I know a lot of people, especially in the Discord, are just throwing around stats, but it just seemed like, especially as you watch some of these players react on Twitter and some of the videos going around by fans. Of course, as I said, some of the Fenerbahce fans are some of the best in the world. That this is so much bigger. I think that just going into the numbers would just be a little cruel, right? And I honestly take no joy in this. I take no joy in this, because the thing is that I think almost it would have been better had they just been blown out. I think it honestly would have been better had they just been blown out, right? 2-0, 3-0, 3-0, 6-0 in sets. You're not moving on. Because at that point, you can say, like, hey, we just weren't good enough, and maybe we just blow everything up, right? But now, once again, you were just a hair width away, and you weren't able to close the deal. And on top of that, like, I don't even know where Fenerbahce needs to go from here. I really don't, because to me, they've done, like, whenever I criticize teams, there's always, like, a few things, like, A, you're not spending enough. Well, they have one of the biggest budgets in the world, spending millions on players in a sport that doesn't spend millions, with one of the most expensive rosters in the world, right? Oftentimes they say, teams just like jump around from player to player to player, right? That core has been together for years. That core has been together for years. And if you look at past years, they're like, we're missing a setter. They went and got a setter. We're missing a little bit of a reception. They went and got reception. They did so many things to fix this team, and they still couldn't make it happen, right? Honestly, if you look online, and it's a little tough, of course, because so many of the responses and comments are in Turkish, so I have to agonizingly slowly translate them. But there does seem to be a lot of blame on Abonanza, and to me, that's where I would put it. But of course, that might be a little bit biased because of his time with Team Canada, before COVID. I know that a lot of players didn't really like him here, and so I would be a little bit biased. However, like when you look at their coaching history before Abondanza, like you had Stefano Lavarini, you had Zoran Terzic, like you had guys who knew how to get the job done, right? And it hurts because at the end of the day, like this is a team that spends millions, that has a great fan base, and has seemed to do everything right. And not only are they inflicted with, one of the worst losing streaks overall that I've ever heard of because of how agonizingly close they are time and time again, right? This isn't a team that's used to losing. This is a team that is used to winning. And on top of all that, right, this is a team that has now gone since 2012. They won their first Champions League. And not only have they not won one since then, but they haven't even gone back to the finals since then. It's really hard to watch. It's really hard to watch. Honestly, like this play right here, to me, is where it could have gone wrong. Skinner with the swing in the golden set. It's 12-11 for Scandici right at Gisem Orge, and she's unable to make that dig. And even Louis Lett said, like, hey, that was one of them that she wanted. But you know what? Like, once again, it's not on one player. It's not on one play, even though I know that frustratingly she'll be thinking about it. But it's things like this, and we saw her reaction right there, that it really feels like the volleyball gods were trying to inflict as much pain as possible on Fenerbahce and its fans. And honestly, I think that sucks. I know you guys are usually used to me coming on and getting upset and pointing out where people are making mistakes and stuff like that, but I think in a minutia way, it's so difficult to break everything down because this is such a constant thing, and they've done, in my opinion, so many of the right things and just weren't able to get it done. And maybe there is really a curse. Maybe the volleyball gods just truly don't want Fenerbahce to win, but I hope they get there one day because it would be sweet. It absolutely would be.